This interview is of Carl Seltzer of A56 Armored Infantry Battalion. He's being interviewed by Dr. Vernon L. Williams on March the 8th, 1996 in Houston, Texas. Carl, if you would, give us a little bit of a background of where you grew up and who your parents were and what you were doing in the 20s and 30s before Pearl Harbor.
Well, I was born and raised here in Houston. I was schooled here in Houston, and I was working more or less in the jewelry business and also in the clothing business, and I was assistant manager of a big clothing chain here in Houston when I was drafted to go into the Army. But anyway, I graduated high school, Jefferson Davis High, and I happened to be very fortunate. I had a good set of parents. My mother and father were from Europe, from the old country, from Poland, I believe, and I had one sister who is a couple of years older than I am. So to make a long story short, when the draft started in the country, things got real bad. I happened to be in the first draft, which I wasn't pleased because I thought I was the only one in the city of Houston who left all my buddies behind, and I had to go and serve my country, which I did. So to make a long story short, I was drafted and inducted in the service in San Antonio, Texas, at Dodd Field or Fort Sam Houston. I stayed there about 2 months or 3 for orientation, all drilling, close order drill, and different tests, and to see how well I was qualified. Then most of the boys I was in the service with, they're in training for the 3 months. It's supposed to have been 13 weeks. Most of them went to California into the infantry. I was one of the few fortunate ones that went to Camp Wallace, Texas. It was a new artillery camp that just had opened up. Mud knee deep, no grass, but it was a beautiful camp. It's called Camp Wallace. It was located in Hitchcock, Texas, approximately about 25 or 30 miles this side of Galveston. And this was for advanced training in anti-aircraft. So during my training, I had come home every weekend. It was very close to Houston. I was ice skating here at Polo Wave Ice Skating Rink one Sunday afternoon when they had announced Pearl Harbor had been bombed. The music had stopped and said, anyone in uniform, report back to your camp. And we all turned around. There was quite a few boys and girls there. And we kept asking one another, where is Pearl Harbor? We never heard of it. So anyway, I went home, took my skates off, went home, told my mother and dad what had happened, what we heard, and I had dinner with them on Sunday evening. And I believe my mother and father had driven me back to Camp Wallace, Texas, and I reported in. We were supposed to have been there about 3 or 4 months for advanced training, which I only stayed about perhaps 3 weeks after that. Then I was shipped to Washington, D.C. in the MPs. I remained in Washington, which was excellent duty. I remained there approximately 1 year. We had 4 sets of wools. Most GIs only have 1 or 2 sets, and 4 sets of khakis the summertime. And the reason for this was Washington, D.C. is a clean, clean city. and there were always parades. Every other day there was some type of parade, and we were always on extra duty. I worked Washington Monument, uh, Abraham Lincoln Memorial, 14th Street Bridge, and Haynes Point, which is around the Potomac River, cherry blossoms. And my duty was to make sure in the summertime, all these here people with cameras taking pictures, we would have to confiscate the film because things were so bad at that time in 41 that our president thought any minute there would be a bunch of German paratroopers dropping on Washington, D.C., and we'd have to be fighting them hand-to-hand combat. Every building in Washington was armed with a machine gun, and as you know, there were no skyscrapers in Washington. Every building was flat on the top, and where we could mount 40 millimeters, 50 caliber machine guns, and no building was taller than the Capitol. But nevertheless, I remained there 1 year, had excellent duty, had the pleasure of being in the White House 3 times, spoke with Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady, and I also have pictures of her, which I brought over today, and I saw the President, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, once. But I did see his wife because his wife did get around. She enjoyed visiting the GIs, making her rounds, inspecting camps. She loved it, and she was on our base 2 or 3 times. But I did take a few photographs. But after 1 year of glorious service, which I enjoyed immensely, it was beautiful. People were nice, the city was clean, and nothing like Constitution Avenue or New York Avenue. Anyway, make a long story short, we had march orders, meaning they mustered all of us together, got on a train, and we went to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, which was a port of debarkation, which we understood later on. This is where they're forming troops, getting armies together, battalions together, and we're in for a boat ride somewhere in about 30 days or 60 days. All leaves have been canceled, and that's when everybody stopped eating and started worrying, where are we going next? Well, anyway, in about 6 days that I was at Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, or 7, they took us by truckload to the docks in New York Harbor, and we boarded on the Queen Elizabeth. That was the biggest ship, I think, in the world. It took up blocks and blocks of space. It stayed in the docks 7 days, and as far as the eye could see, like ants building a mound, it was nothing but troops for 7 days getting on that ship. And after we left the harbor, we found out that there was 40,000 men on the Queen Elizabeth. It's going to cross the North Atlantic, and we had escort out of the harbor for about the first 2 days, and then most of the destroyers had turned around and came back or dispersed. But anyway, it took us 7 days to get to Garrick, Scotland. Out of the 40,000 troops, I think 35,000 were seasick. There were no one in the bunk. Everybody was fighting for a place on the edge of the ship so they'd have a little room to upchuck. They were so sick, and we were only fed twice a day, those that wanted to be fed. I was one of the luckier GIs because we mounted the anti-aircraft guns on the Queen Elizabeth which was only a few right on the deck, so we had the promenade deck. Most of the other GIs, which included infantry, included Air Force, medics, armored, and the entire Army, whatever it takes to make up an armored division, was on this ship. And the reason it took us 7 days, every minute, or every 3 minutes, the ship changed course. They had to do this to secure the safety of the ship to get to England, because it took us I think 5 minutes to get on course and get zeroed in for a shot. So every minute we zigzagged, and it took us a week to get to Scotland or Ireland, wherever we landed, I can't remember. Then we went by train to Tidsworth, England. There we received commando training by the Limeys. And let me say this in all sincerity, they are the worst, the toughest, the meanest SOBs we ever ran across. But they made men out of us. And the reason they were like this, they had just lost the Battle of Dunkirk a couple of years before this. And they were going to make sure they're going to win if it takes the Americans to do it. And when they got through with us, I'm telling you, this little pretty face of mine, and now I sound a little bit like Channel 13's eyewitness newsman. You know who he is. I don't want to mention any names. He's very vain. He's always talking about his operations. But I just started shaving. I had white teeth, a lot of coal black hair, and now no hair, plenty of bad teeth, and so on and so forth, 50 years later. But nevertheless, I'm kind of off the course now, so I'll get back to England. We remain there in cold weather, October, November, December. I have never seen so much snow in my life. Oh, was it cold. But we did train. We received our complete training after 90 days, and our final test in England, commando training, was a 25-mile hike. And let me tell you, this was no piece of cake, because England is not flat land like Lubbock or Houston, where you just walk like on a desert. I mean, it's hilly. It's up and down. And if you didn't make it, you couldn't make it, you fell out. There were 2 trucks following the troops and picking up the guys that fell out. And if you did fall out, you'd have to do it at a later date. There was no turning back unless you just dropped dead, and then they'd ship your body back home. But anyway, we made it back after 25 miles, and we were told in 2 hours we would have lunch or a snack. Most of the GIs pull their shoes off, air out their feet, let the steam get out. Well, that was the biggest mistake most of us made. Once you took your shoes off, there was no putting them back on. Your feet swelled up so bad, there was no way in the world you could put your shoes back on. Not for that day or that night, not till the next day. But anyway, we remained there, and after our training period was over, we were all congratulated, lined up, and said we could all go into London for a 24-hour pass, which most of us who was still able to walk took the opportunity of leaving. They were glad to get out of this hellhole. But in about 5 days, we rested up, and we received march order. We were leaving. We had no idea. We had no idea as to where our destination was. But my battery commander, I'm sure he did. We boarded a ship in England. It was named the Empress of Canada. And we all thought we were going to Hawaii or going to New Delhi, somewhere in India, and play tennis. We had no idea where we were going. But after 3 days out at sea on the Empress of Canada, they took our uniforms in. They called us. We were all notified, turn in our ODs, the heavy blankets that we wore in England, and we were given khakis. And everybody was so overly joyed by having khakis. They knew they were going to a hot country, England, and do nothing but play tennis and enjoy life. Pool, rugby, or whatever they did in India. We have no idea. But the day before we landed, we were informed we're part of an invasion and we're going into North Africa. We still weren't sure, but we knew one thing, that we were on the high seas for 14 days after we left England. So on the day before we come in, we looked out at daybreak and we counted as many as 640 ships. We don't know where they came from, but there were 3 points that we invaded at that time. It was Oran, Algiers, and Casablanca. Casablanca was so the Germans or whoever we were fighting with could not go out the back way. So we kept pushing them all through North Africa into Tunisia. And from Tunisia, of course, we didn't do this overnight. It lasted a good 3 or 4 months. And we were moving real good until the German command decided to put their general, was a Top Gun, Rommel, in there, said the Americans are moving too fast. And Rommel knew the strategy of Montgomery in Patton. So it was more or less after that a tug of war. But as I'm here telling the story, you know, we came out victorious. And from Tunisia, we remained there after hostilities were over with. The campaign was over with in North Africa. We remained there about 30 days, and then we jumped off in Sicily, the island of Sicily. The Germans had no business in Africa. They didn't want to fight. And the Italians in Africa, they couldn't understand what was going on. And the French, all they wanted to do was drink wine, eat, and hold hands with some female and walk around and just laugh and have a good time. So it was mostly the Americans pushing their way. So in about a month later, we invaded Sicily, which really was a piece of cake. Sicily, there was 1,000 B-17s that dropped leaflets on the Isle of Sicily and stating that we would destroy the entire island and the invasion would be within 24 hours. This is enough time for them to surrender, give up their arms, or decide whether they want to fight or not. And the Italians and the Sicilians, or whoever was left on that island, had never seen 1,000 B-17s flying fortresses. They thought, they didn't know what to think, that the heavens opened up and a bunch of blackbirds flew out of it to put a voodoo on Sicily. They had given up after about 36 hours. It was all over with. And the Germans again figured, what are we doing on this island? Let's all go in through the boot of Italy and get the heck out of Sicily. And we'll go back to the we'll go back to Italy. And the Italians, they had bad equipment. They didn't want to fight to begin with because they had all relatives in America and everybody was called cousin. And they were the nicest people in the world at that time in 42. They were real nice. So we made our headquarters in Palermo, which is the capital of Sicily, and we remained there almost a year. Regrouped, retrained after a year, and we went into Italy. just for backup purposes, reinforcement, so on and so forth. We had no skirmishes in Italy, and I was privileged to go to Rome on R&R for 3 days. I went to the Vatican City, was blessed by Pope Paul the 12th, and maybe that's why I'm here doing this interview and I'm still alive after 50 long years. And this is about it up to now. And we remained in Italy, and then we regrouped after 3 or 4 months, and then went into the invasion of southern France. We weren't in the first or second wave, we were like the third week in the southern France. I was still with an anti-aircraft outfit. And as we moved in to Germany, through Belgium, into Strasbourg, we was taking a toll on the Luftwaffe, on the German planes, and so was the Americans, and so was the British. We were bombing Germany 24 hours a day. The Americans were bombing in the daytime, and the English Lancasters were doing the bombing at night. They didn't want to fly under no conditions in the daytime. They said, you know, it's kind of dangerous in the daytime. But nevertheless, we did a number on them, and as the years went by, or months went by, the Luftwaffe was depleted, and anti-aircraft was becoming obsolete. There was really nothing to shoot at, so we converted the guns into field artillery. And then when conditions got real bad, in the infantry, in the armored division, and so on and so forth, at the end of 44, General Patton demanded reinforcements, needed them in the worst way, and he could not wait for them to be trained in the United States. So he issued a command that 10% of all the troops who are not in combat, I don't care if it's cooks or what they're doing, to be trained and to be reclassified into some type of armored or infantry. They were needed badly along the borders at that time. So I was transferred into the 12th Armored Division.
What division were you in at the time of that transfer?
I don't remember, sir. It was anti-aircraft.
Okay.
It was an anti-aircraft, 90 millimeter anti-aircraft. The biggest gun they had in the anti-aircraft.
Where were you located at the time of getting this news of the transfer?
Strasbourg.
So you were close to the 12th Armored.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We're very close to the 12th Armored.
Well, what happened as soon as you get the news? What occurs?
Well, they picked out 10%, which I was one of the 10, in the 10%, to be transferred out. I think they were, we had close to 150 men, and they took 15 men out of the outfit, so many from each gun crew. And I knew the gun pretty well and had an important job on a field piece, so they took me. They figured I'd be valuable, or I don't know how they considered sending me there, but nevertheless, I had no choice in the matter. But instead of ending up in the aircraft, anti-aircraft, or field artillery, which you had, I ended up in an armored infantry battalion, the 56th Armored Infantry. And I was interviewed by an officer, and he asked me where I'm from. Told him, Houston, Texas. He says, well, I'm Lieutenant so-and-so. He says, I need 3 sergeants and 1 staff sergeant. And he says, how long you been in the service? I says, almost 3 years, sir. 3 years? And he looked at me as if to say, my God, that's wonderful. You're still alive? Are you human? He couldn't believe it, and I wished I remembered the man's name. He made me a staff sergeant. He says, I need a platoon leader to work under one of my lieutenants. He says, but where do you come from? What have you done? I says, I come out of North Africa. I was trained as a commando in England. Oh, that's what I want to know. Great, great. He says, well, I made a good choice. He says, I want you to take 12 men and I want you to go up that bridge and keep it from blowing up because we're going to have tanks coming in here within 24 hours and we need that bridge. Now, I answered this officer by saying, sir, I can't pick 10 or 12 men. You'll have to volunteer them. You'll have to do that for me. I don't even know who they are, sir. I've only been here about 6 hours, and I have not talked to anyone. You're the first officer I've talked to. He says, okay, I'll get all your volunteers for you. And we were about 50 yards away when hell broke loose. I was knocked out by concussion. This officer that promoted me to staff sergeant lost his life. I had laid out in the snow all night. Didn't know this. Next morning, a paramedic, well, they didn't call him paramedic. I think they called him corpsman then, came up. He looked at me. I think he took my pulse, felt my wrist, and I don't know how I had so much clothes on, so many clothes. It was so cold. And he shook me, my eyes open. And he says, are you alive? And I looked at him, and I think I nodded. And then he hollered for help, and he brought a stretcher. He says, I have a live one here. A man is still alive. And I was taken to the hospital. I was evacuated to a station hospital, then to a field hospital, or a field hospital first, then a station hospital, and remained there. And no medication, just rest, laying there. And they said, we have to take this man to a field hospital and really examine him. His feet don't look right. And I was shipped to the 3rd General Hospital outside of France, outside of Paris. And I remained there 3 months. While I was there, they treated my feet. They were in bad, bad shape.
What was wrong with them?
I think they were frozen, sir. They split on me, and it was listed as severe. And I tried. So I remained in the hospital 3 months, but while I was there, I contacted hepatitis and a few other things, and it was mostly rest, and they treated my feet, and I kept losing weight, and they kept watching this concussion. I was unconscious for, like I say, all night long. After 3 months, the captain of the ward came in and said, Seltzer, you're going before the board tomorrow. I want you to clean up, get some clean pajamas, in a robe. I had no clothes, not anything. He says, you're going before a board. There'll be 3 officers, including the colonel, and salute. And they'll ask you a few questions, which I did. And they asked me how long I have been in combat. I told them over 100 days. And they looked at me, sized me up. I said, no further questions. How much do you weigh? I said, 137. I said, would you like to go home? I think I started crying. Not sure. I said, yes, sir, I sure would. So next day they issued clothes again, like the same type ODs I got when I first come into service. You couldn't find my fingertips. The shirt was so long on me. The sleeves. I was walking on my pant legs. They were about 2 inches too long. The bottom of my trousers. And like I say, they put me in an ambulance, took me to the docks with an envelope, had all my papers in it, all my records, and put me on a hospital ship. And from France, I think we left from Le Havre, I'm not sure, we had gone to Italy to pick up some more people on the hospital ship, patients. But in the meantime, while I was in the hospital, the war ended in Europe. The war was over with, and I was on a hospital ship, and we came home, and we landed in Boston under an escort of about 20 other big ships. This was the first hospital ship that came back to the United States with 6,200 veterans. And I happened to be the second one off the ship. I walked off the ship. They took my picture and my buddy that was holding on to me at the time. And I wanted this picture very badly because it's history, and I didn't think I'd live this long to keep it. I wrote to all the newspapers. I couldn't find out who took the picture, and what paper it appeared in. So my friend was an attorney. He says, "Let me research it. Let me try it, Carl." So he wrote to Boston, all the newspapers. This was about 3 years after I was out of the service, or 4. And he found a newspaper. It was a Christian Science Monitor, which is a big paper. And they had my picture in it. And I have the article here. I brought it. I have the original framed at home in a big glass frame. And this is a photostat copy of the picture showing me and my buddy sitting there, a picture of the ship with 6,200 patients on a hospital ship cheering in a Boston harbor. Now, to my demise, when I was in San Antonio, wait a minute, I'm jumping the gun. I stayed in Boston for about another month, and they come to find out that I came from Houston, Texas. So what they do, they usually try to transfer you to the nearest town that you're from. So I was transferred to San Antonio, Texas.
What was your medical condition at this time? Could you walk? How were your feet?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. My feet had healed. I remained in the hospital 3 months in Europe, and I also remained in Boston about a month. Yes, sir, they started healing real well the last week before I came home, but it took a long time. They were split, they were cracked, and half of them lost their feet. But this was a much more severe case than mine, where they had frozen feet. Mine, like I say, I'm very fortunate. I only stay there in the snow or in the ice like overnight, and it wasn't that bad. I had combat boots on, I had heavy socks, but to make a long story short, they healed, and I was walking, thank God, and I came to San Antonio. And while I was in San Antonio, he says, "Well, the first thing we want to do is not process you. I think you are going to the Pacific." I said, "No, you have the wrong man. I'm not going to Pacific. I did my duty in the ETO." And this little corporal says, "We'll see about that." I says, "What do you mean?" He says, "You're not dictating in the Army." I said, "I have been in a hospital." He says, "Nevertheless, if you're that bad off, we'll reclassify you as not combat, but non-combat duty. But you're still going to Pacific." And then I heard a rumor that you needed 85 points to be discharged out of the Army. I didn't have 85 points. I had 115 points. So I found out immediately where the office was that were sending people home, not inducting anybody. I went there, and they said, "Wait your turn." I sat there. They called me in. They said, "Mr. Seltzer?" I said, "Yes." "I hear you have more than 85 points." He says, "How's that possible?" I says, "Well, you have my records. Let's check them over." So he checked my record, and I got so many points for being in combat, so many points for being overseas. You must remember, I was overseas 3 long years, ever since England, which most of them didn't have. Most of them were overseas a year. I was there 3 years. So I accumulated 115. Plus, I've already had, I think, a few campaign ribbons that call for an extra 5 points, an extra 3 points, an extra 10. Whatever the case may be, I had 115. But my disappointment was they figured up my pay. And this came as a shock to me. I went in the Army as a private, came out as a private. I never got my records. The officer who made me a staff sergeant was killed before he turned in all the information he got. And
he had taken and written down some things.
he had written down a history of how long I'd been overseas, what I had done, and also promoted me to staff sergeant. But on the way back to headquarters, when we all got shattered, mortar just dropped all around us, he lost his life. And for the grace of God, I don't know. I had been knocked out by concussion. I don't know if an 88 hit a tree or hit a building or what. But anyway, the blast, concussion, knocked me silly, and maybe that's why I'm suffering now. Came to me many years later. I get this vertigo feeling, and they say it's from inner ear problems. It's reoccurable. It comes back about every 2 or 3 years. But anyway, I got paid as a private, all my back pay, and was paid a transportation so much a mile from San Antonio to Houston. And I never received a Purple Heart. It never received my staff sergeant's rating. Now, I have tried for 50 years, like about every 10 years, I'll get an urge. I said, let me write Washington, D.C. and see what happens. So I wrote Washington, D.C., and the first 10 years, I'm sorry, we have no records. They were burned up in a fire in St. Louis. 10 years later, I attempted again. We have no records. We had a second set of all the records of the GIs in Florida. In the building, or the records were destroyed. So I tried again 30 years later. But anyway, this went on and on. And about 2 months ago, about a year ago, I received a letter from Washington, D.C. If I could substantiate my casualty, what had happened to me, why I ended up in a hospital, if I could get some records to back my claim and get someone to represent me, they'll open my case in Washington and see what they could do about my Purple Heart. Well, this took almost 2 years in coming. I had forgot about it. And about a year ago, I received a stack of records, yay high, of the hospital that I was in Europe. And every time I was given a shot in my arm, it was listed. Every test I had taken, when I entered, the different hospitals I went to. They kept shipping me to different hospitals, the medication I was on. And I went up to the VA hospital here, and Disabled American Veterans represented me, put all this together, wrote a letter, and we sent it off in January to Washington, D.C. for my Purple Heart. It's in the making now, and if I get it, fine. If I don't get it, it's all right too, as long as I'm still here and moving around. So just recently, the past year, I put a little case together with all my medallions, my medals, everything in there, plus my Bronze Star, and I've gotten 6 or 7 Silver Stars for different campaigns. Bronze Stars, 6 Bronze Stars. For every 5 or every 6 Bronze Stars, you get 1 Silver Star. So I have 1 Silver Star and 1 Bronze Star on my ETO campaign ribbon, and also I have a individual Bronze Star with my name engraved on the back of it, plus an expert, plus a rifleman's badge, infantry badge, which I have the whole set in the other room, which I brought along with me, and a copy of my journey back on a hospital ship, and a picture.
We'll take a few minutes to film that in a moment at the end of this and put it on this tape. But the fact that you were able to recover those hospital records intrigues me. In looking at that material, at the beginning of that, showing your admittance,
Yes, sir.
was there any background information that might indicate what date you were wounded? Do you remember? In other words, if we could find out the date, then we can match it with the killed in action. We might be able to find out the name of this officer. Maybe some of the personal effects sent back to his family might have that notebook or whatever. It's an awful long shot, but
Sir, let me say this. If I get my Purple Heart, which is in the making, you know, Washington, D.C., they don't do things in a hurry. That is the largest building under one structure, the Pentagon. You could put 12 capitals in that one building, I understand. The longest single structure building in the United States. Anyway, if I get my Purple Heart, I'm contented. The heck with everything else, the money, but it just, I don't know if you're taping this or not, I hope not, but, oh well, it was awfully sad to me because I didn't feel disgraced. That's not the word I'm looking for. It's just ashamed that I did so much, gone so many places, still remember all the countries I was in, and each little event would happen, that I couldn't really sit down with my 3 sons and talk about like having show and tell, you know what I mean, as to my promotion and so on and so forth. So as I came in a private, I come out a private, you know what I mean? But I'm so glad I'm here. I don't know if it's because I'm a religious person, I believe in God, or I was blessed by the Pope. I don't know, sir. But I'm here, and it's an honor and a privilege to talk to you.
well, thank you. I'm going to stop the camera for a moment, then we'll turn it back on, and we'd like to shoot some of your medals and
Sure.
some of the materials you brought. So let's turn
Certainly.
it off momentarily.
In fact, I told Marion she can have that picture of me. That's a duplicate copy or a photostat copy. I want you to take it back or whatever you plan on doing with it. And it shows where 2 GIs had come back, and we've been in Europe. We've been all the way from the African front, and we returned on a hospital ship to Boston. Over 3 years, you know, away from home.
Okay, Mr. Seltzer, this is your medals and some of the other things that relate to your military service. Could you just tell us a little bit about what's in the picture here?
Certainly. Of course, we were all in the 12th Armored Division. This is our shoulder patch, which everyone is familiar with. This is the original dog tags that was given to me that made me seriously ill when I received them. This is 6 hash marks, meaning for each one, we spend 6 months overseas. That's 3 years. This is my discharge pin, and this is my infantry, my combat infantry badge. And we were all in the 7th Army at 7 steps. A for Army. And they're not necessarily in order because I am waiting from Washington, D.C. on a Purple Heart. And I should get the bad news in another 30 days. If I do, fine. If I don't, I'm still here, and I think I can still make it with the help of the good Lord. Now, these medals are not necessarily in order, but when I get my Purple Heart, I'll change them around. The first one, from left to right, is a Good Conduct Medal. The second one is a Victory World War II Medal. The third one is an Army of Occupation. And the fourth one, which shows a star on the bottom, is your Bronze Star. My name is engraved on the back side. The fifth one is a European, African, Middle Eastern with 6 bronze campaign stars. And for every 5 bronze stars, you're awarded a silver star. So as you notice, I have 1 silver star on a campaign ribbon plus 1 Bronze Star. The 6th one is American Defense Service Ribbon. The 7th is American Campaign Ribbon. And I believe I had mentioned all this before about the overseas hash marks and the Combat Infantry Badge, which is awarded if you actually see combat or if you're in combat. So these are all my battles and campaign ribbons. Algeria, French Morocco, Tunisia, Sicily, Rome, Arno, southern France, and Rhineland.
You have a marksmanship medal there too?
Yes,
what is
sir.
It?
Here on the right.
And
that is, I don't think it's marksman. It's one step higher.
Yeah, let's see, expert and then sharpshooter.
Sharpshooter.
That's it.
That's what it is. Thank you, sharpshooter.
What about the medallion?
I was good.
What about the medallion to the right of the 12th Armored Patch? What is that?
That is
under
just,
your discharge.
Yeah, that's just
commemorative coin.
No, just a commemorative of the organization, the 12th Armored, which I was in the 56th Armored Infantry, and this is a coin right here.
Right.
A commemorative coin, 50 years, 12th Armored Division.
When did you qualify and where on the sharpshooter? Was that at Camp Wallace?
Camp Wallace, Texas, 1941, which no one's ever heard of. A lot of them haven't, but Mrs. Miller has a smile on her face. She was probably out there when they laid the cornerstone.
Okay, we have the clipping that you tracked down with the Christian Science Monitor. Show us what's there.
This is the hospital ship that left Le Havre, France, went to Italy, picked up more patients, and we come into Boston after about 7 days. There were 6,200 veterans, patients on his ship as far back as Africa, and I happen to be one of the 6,200. Here's me on the right side. This is me, and we arrived in Boston in the harbor.
Did you get any grief about the beards?
None whatsoever. In fact, there's a write-up. It said they still have the Italian and the African beards on them, and they look great.
And you have an original copy of the front page or the page that this came from, or is it a photograph of the page?
It is a photostat copy, but it's better quality than this one here, because this was taken from the one I got off one of these machines at a Utotem or a drive-in. I have that under glass framed on a wall, and it's pretty big.
Did you ever get a copy of the photograph itself from the paper?
No, sir. No, sir.
Did you ever find out if it was even still in existence?
No, sir, I haven't.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Like I say, it took 10 years to find out that was a Christian Science Monitor. I had my friend who's an attorney, Mr. Brockstein. He researched every newspaper in Boston, come to find out Christian Science Monitor. And the first thing they offered us was ice cream. All I wanted to do was get home. I could buy my own ice cream.
This is the end of the interview, end of tape.